The new kid on the block, Stardust Racers versus the absolute legend Velocicoaster. Both of these coasters have been praised ever since the day they opened, and both of these rides are well worth the hype. Velocicoaster opened in 2021 as an Intamin Blitz coaster, and Stardust Racers opened in 2025 as a mock multi-launch coaster. They are both some of my all-time favorite coasters for pretty different reasons. Lastly, before we begin, the way I'll decide the winner is by comparing each in a category, and the winner gets a point. However, a tie results in half a point. So with that out of the way, let's begin this duel. Starting with everyone's favorite force, Airtime. Starting with Velocicoaster, it is nothing but ejector. Tons of pops, and every now and then, a solidly sustained moment. The star moments for Airtime on Velocicoaster are the dive loop, ejector pop coming right after, top hat, wave turn, outer bank, Mosasaurus roll, and S-hill into the brakes. These are all some world-class ejector moments, and you may have noticed 2 of them are upside down, which is just madness, but we're going to get into that later. Now looking at Stardust Racers, this is where the ride shines. So much quantity of airtime, and every moment is one of the strongest moments I've ever experienced. The stars here are the top hat, just never-ending sequence of camelbacks and speed hills, celestial spin, S-hill, outer bank high five, thing, and the pop into the brakes. These to me are all RMC level airtime, and that speed hill on the yellow side is stronger than any element on any RMC I've experienced. But truly, all of this airtime kind of blew me away. And I think that first camelback after the dive loop turn is a strong contender for the best element on any coaster I've experienced. Both of these have world-class airtime, but one stands out far more between the two, and that's obviously Stardust Racers. 1-0 Stardust Racers. We now come to the similar elements category. For each of these, the winner will gain half a point. Starting with, for the top hats, I go Velocicoaster. Arguably a tiny bit weaker forces, but have much more sustained forces, better visuals, and you whip into it instead of just going straight up. 0.5 points for Velocicoaster. S-hill. Stardust Racers takes this. It's one of the whippiest moments on any coaster I've experienced, and is just taken at an insane pace. 0.5 points for Stardust Racers. Dive loop. Yes, I'm counting Stardust Racers similar enough to be compared, and we'll give it the point. Crazy whip and ejector going down in the back row, and insanely strong airtime going into the element up front. 0.5 points for Stardust. And lastly, outer bank. These to me actually feel quite similar, but one is leagues ahead of the other, and that's Stardust Racers. It is very sustained ejector airtime while leaning towards another train, giving an incredible dueling visual. 0.5 more points for Stardust Racers, meaning it gained 1.5 points for this category, and Velocicoaster just 0.5, making the score 2.5 to 0.5. We now enter a category one is the best in the world at, theming. Velocicoaster is quite possibly the best themed thrill coaster on the planet, if not second or third. You don't just have the rock work and waterfalls and raptors, you are immersed into a story throughout, and it is amazing getting that feeling while also experiencing an intense ride. Velocicoaster also is probably my personal favorite queue ever, especially the scene where velociraptors chase after the train that goes by, and when you see full-sized animatronics of them. It is incredible, and honestly Stardust can't really compete here. I would say it's stylized, not themed. It's still above average, but it isn't any Velocicoaster. This brings the score to 2.5 Stardust Racers, 1.5 Velocicoaster. Looking at launches, both have 2, and both are home to some of the best out there. Velocicoaster's first launch is good, nothing crazy, but that second launch is where it shines, and that launch is incredible. However, Stardust Racers has a better launch on both occasions. The first one feeling like it would be a mid-launch for the first 2 or so seconds before hitting a second gear. That's the most punchy launch I've ever experienced. I had heard people talking about this going in, but did not expect it to be that insane. Plus, the second launch is arguably just as good. Around as good as Velocicoaster's second, probably, a little better. However, if your train is behind the other up to this point, the train that is behind will have an extra boost to catch it up for the celestial spin. And that happened to me twice on this ride. And I can say that goes from my second or third favorite launch to my absolute favorite. The score is now 3.5 to 1.5 Stardust Racers. We now come to Restraints. Both of these rides are home to my two favorite Restraints in the world. Stardust Racers having an over-the-shoulder lap bar, quite comfy, a little heavy but doesn't come down that much, and your seats are also elevated, which adds to the experience. Velocicoaster is basically the same in all those, but the lap bar is lighter and comes down less, and your seats are a little lower. But the height difference isn't that much, so I have to give this to Velocicoaster, making the score 3.5 to 2.5 Stardust Racers. We will now see which one of these rides is more intense. On Stardust Racers, there's a stupid amount of some of the strongest airtime ever. Lots and lots of positive G's, and those positives are sometimes genuinely gray out inducing, and some crazy whip along the way. Velocicoaster can't really match Stardust Racers' intensity. It has good ejector airtime around the place, some amazing head and hand choppers, every now and then some decent positives, and some really good whip. But I would argue Stardust Racers is better in every single one of those things I just said, and definitely takes the intensity up a notch from something like Velocicoaster, making the score 4.5 to 2.5 Stardust Racers. Whenever we look at which ride has a better inversion collection, it's a little unfair, as it's a 4v1, unless you want to count this weird dive loop turn thing, then it's a 4 versus 2, but meh, I don't think it counts. However, even if it is unfair, I still have to compare them because it's an important factor. Stardust Racers are home to the Celestial Spin, which is quite possibly my favorite inversion ever, and my favorite coaster element ever. However, Velocicoaster has 4 inversions, 3 being world class and 1 super mid. That's the stall, but the rest are amazing. The Immersion gives ejector coming out, the dive loop gives ejector going in, and the Mosasaurus roll is, well, the frickin' Mosasaurus roll. I'll talk about that element more later though, but this officially makes the score 4.5 to 3.5 Stardust Racers. Whenever I think of the most important factor of a ride, I think of pacing. If an airtime hill is taken at a snail's pace, or maybe an S-bend, they're not going to hit the same. So it really matters to have a good pace throughout. Velocicoaster is one of the most unique situations, as the two halves are basically dead opposites of each other. The first all about mid-paced, compact elements that let you take in the rock work, and also get some wonky forces, and the second half drawn out and full of crazy paced elements, and it is a really huge step up from the first half. It might sound bad that the first half of Velocicoaster is so mediocre compared to the second, but I actually love the way it builds and ends off at its fastest and best instead of dying down. However, Stardust Racers keeps up a consistent pace throughout. The first half feeling a little slower, but you are still interested because literally every element is a camelback or something with a cool crossover or very, very, very good airtime. Then the second half is better paced than Velocicoaster's. You just rip through every element and it's insane. The sense of speed is honestly beyond rides like Gwazi in this half. And I think a big contributing factor to this is that you're taking all of these crazy elements on a crazy pace while dueling. Stardust Racers wins this category, no questions asked. 5.5 Stardust Racers, 3.5 Velocicoaster. For layout, they are both world class and up there are some of the best. Starting with Velocicoaster again, I brought it up in pacing. This ride builds on itself. It goes from fun and okay to okay, this is awesome, to absolute insanity with that ending. This is one of the most unique and pure fun layouts of all time and I adore it. However, with Stardust Racers, I do think it builds on itself, but it is far more consistent throughout, and there's tons of variety. You perfectly transitions from bonkers ejector to fast-paced, intense machine. And I love how the two halves feel distinctly different, but blend perfectly. Sorry, Velocicoaster fans, Stardust Racers is taking this yet again. 6.5 to 3.5 Stardust Racers. We now enter our very last category, and this is an element-to-element comparison, and the winner gets 3 points. Mosasaurus roll versus Celestial Spin. The Mosasaurus roll gives upside down ejector, the super funky feeling whip, and awesome visuals over the water. The Celestial Spin is kind of like the Mosasaurus roll and death roll combined. It builds up speed rapidly the same way as the death roll. By the way, I'm talking about the yellow side here because it's way better. Anyway, but you also get the ejector and whip of the Mosasaurus roll. And on top of all of that, the cherry on top, you're doing it over and under another train. If we ended the comparison right here, it's an extremely hard decision, but I have 2 words: night rides. And one of these excels far ahead of the other here, and that's the Celestial Spin. The feeling of seeing that glowing blue, purple, or sometimes even red train flipping above you, or you flipping above it, is just so magical. Honestly, it's the most magic I've felt on a coaster. It truly felt like two comets racing through the sky, and I adore it. Not only is the Celestial Spin my all-time favorite inversion, but it is my favorite element on any coaster, period. I adore both of these elements, but at the end of the day, the Celestial Spin won, earning the promised 3 points, making the final score an absolute landslide for Stardust Racers, 9.5 to 3.5. That was the final category, and we have officially finished this battle. Stardust Racers emerged the victor, and being honest, it wasn't even close. And that does resemble what I think of it in real life. I think the fact that it's even a debate to most people, let alone Velocicoaster normally being the favorite, is just crazy and kind of surprising. I think Stardust Racers handedly takes this and is my new favorite coaster in the resort, and possibly in all of Florida. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on Express Thrills. Bye!